CJ Montes to Florida A&M was one of the biggest transfers of this spring session, and all of that excitement has been ripped away just like that. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn on any TV or turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. We'll wrap up today's episode with Diamond Johnson's, I'm going to say permanent, but really I just mean for this season, her permanent exit from the WNBA. In segment 2, South Carolina State women's basketball was in need of a winner, and a winner is what they got. However, this is like the exact opposite, honestly, the exact opposite emotion. But FAMU, they got a big-time quarterback. They needed a big-time quarterback. And then that big-time quarterback said, never mind. I'm okay. I think I'm going to go back to where I came from, And I think that's fascinating because on April 28th, CJ Montes announced that FAMU, I'm home. That was his way of saying he's joining the Rattlers. That tweet has now been taken down, deleted. But he said, I'm home. And it turns out he was just spending the night. That wasn't a long run. He said that he was home, but I think home really called him back because this is strange. I know I've said this about quarterbacks, and we had this conversation with Amari Jones, but CJ Montes transferred back to Kent State, which is where he transferred from. Or he probably just decommitted. That's probably the way to say it. But I spoke about quarterbacks playing by different rules when talking about Amari Jones, who transferred from Florida International to South Carolina State and then to Bethune-Cookman, and how I don't view that as an indecisive move. But if it were another player of another position, I would have a different conversation around it. For example, if we had a wide receiver who started off at one school, transferred, and then transferred to another one after the spring season, I'm looking at you kind of sideways. I'm looking at you wondering what went wrong, or are you just indecisive? Or are you just impatient? Are you just not looking for a home? I said this with Nathan Rimbert. I was confused. It didn't make sense to me. I look at it a whole lot differently. I look at it desiring questions or desiring answers. When it comes to quarterbacks, I already think I have the answer. You wanted that job, you didn't get it, you're moving on. But with CJ Montes, this is different. This is not like Amari Jones because, first off, this is 3 transfers, and I put air quotes on that, but this is 3 change of teams. Definitely. This is that. But you're looking at Montes, who started off at Fordham. Then he enters the portal at the end of last year, transfers to Kent State, spends the spring season with them, transfers to FAMU. Cool. That's just a sign you ain't get the job. That's what I looked at it as. You thought you were going to compete. You realize the competition isn't going your way. So now you're trying to find another move. You go to FAMU. After a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, you're now back at Kent State. That screams indecisive to me. That's what it screams to me. And I don't want to call it 3 complete transfers, but it's 3 change of teams. He was expected to be a Rattler, or he was with Fordham. Then he was with Kent State. Those are official. That was a transfer from Fordham to Kent State. Then he went to FAMU. He was committed. He was expected to be a Rattler. And then you have him going right back to Kent State. So it's kind of like a boom, 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 boom. It's just too many for me to feel comfortable. Now, I do want to say, in the conversation of expectations, The reason the CJ Montes news hurt so bad is because there was a high level of hype around this move, and it didn't feel like a possibility. It felt like reality. I know that technically it's just a commitment, I guess, but it wasn't as if CJ Montes was in your reach or y'all can almost get him. He was in your grasp. He had committed. He was a Rattler. We were having conversations. See, HBCU Sports said, is he the next great SWAT quarterback? There was a high level of anticipation around this move that, listen, it's hard to quantify now what the loss is because he never was on your team. But at the same time, it just feels like you lost something. It feels like you lost something, you know? So that it's a tough pill to swallow, but they were able to make a move right away. It's like, let's say, let me see. I was going to try to. Okay. So here we go. This is what we're going to do. Y'all probably couldn't hear that. Y'all couldn't hear that. But better example. Okay. I was trying to find something. I like visuals. I have this chapstick right here. Right? This is my chapstick. This one isn't open. Doesn't matter. But this is my chapstick. I lose it. Dang, I ain't got no chapstick. I just go get another one. That's how quickly you can do it. Now, typically, you don't do that with quarterbacks. This is how you don't usually do this with quarterbacks. But that was like actually kind of not a good example. Let me just stick with the actual players. But the point is, they changed that quickly. As quickly as I could grab another chapstick is what I was trying to articulate and trying to display. But right after losing CJ Montes, you go ahead and you grab RJ Johnson III out of the transfer portal. Now, this is a clear sign of how you view Tyler Jefferson. And I know that may seem like, how are you bringing a third party into this conversation? That's fine. The way that I look at this is the same way, and I'm trying not to go too hard on Jefferson because I don't want it to change how I'm looking at him completely. It just cements everything that I already believed. When they brought in CJ Montes, I said, oh, they're not happy with the quarterback position. One could argue that Montes is the type of quarterback who, if he enters the portal, you have that conversation because he played at such a high level when he was at Fordham. You could have that conversation. I would allow you to have that argument. I don't think that's how it happened. I said it before. I thought that they were dissatisfied, or they weren't satisfied. I'm not going to say dissatisfied, but they weren't satisfied with what was going on in the QB room. Well, when you lose Montes, if it was just about him, if it was just about CJ, then you just would have lost him and pivoted over back to Tyler Jefferson with no conversation. But that's not what they did. FAMU went and got another quarterback immediately, and that tells you they need competition. If it was all about CJ Montes and being this great prospect that you don't want to pass up on, have to have a conversation, and through that conversation, he decided to commit to you, you could have then moved forward with Tyler Jefferson. But the fact that as soon as Montes leaves, you go ahead and you recruit this guy, RJ Johnson III, who you probably were already recruiting, to be clear. But it tells you how the team looks at Jefferson. It tells you how other prospects look at Jefferson. They look at this FAMU spot as if it is for the taking. And I think it's hard to not view it that way. But if you're talking about from a team standpoint, they want competition. FAMU clearly wants to add more quarterbacks to the room so that they can find their guy. And if that is their attitude, it means they are not sold on Jefferson. It's not just that Montes was this high-level prospect that you couldn't pass up on, because RJ Johnson III is not that. RJ Johnson comes over from Toledo and hasn't played a snap in his last 2 seasons. He hasn't played a snap in his 2 collegiate seasons. So he's not this can't-miss prospect that you have to talk to. He is a quarterback who has a ceiling that if he reaches, maybe he could be talented, but you're still taking a gamble. It's no proof of concept. That existed with Montes. It doesn't exist here. So the way I'm looking at it, though, on a bright side, is Jefferson or Johnson, whoever wins this, they're both redshirt sophomores, and you could get 3 years out of these players. That's 3 years of quality quarterback play if you pick the right guy. Now, as he pushed forward, because that's all there. Like, I don't think there's much on a guy who hasn't played in 2 seasons to talk about. There isn't much to talk about there, in my opinion. But let's push forward and let's talk about South Carolina State, because their women's basketball team, they've identified what they need. I think everybody knows what they need. They need to win. So what do you do when you need to win? You go get a winner. It's just that simple. So let's push forward and talk about that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. And did you know that your TV can be an Xbox? And no, I'm not talking about plugging up your console so that you can play the latest games. All you need is a Fire TV Stick 4K device, and you don't need the console. Get that in a controller, and you on to playing your games. Make sure that you're using Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you can play College Football 25, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, or Avowed. Whatever it is that is your bag, you can dive into it. Endless entertainment. With 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime, Disney Plus, and more. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass, Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd, and then Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA. All of the biggest stories around the biggest time in the association. Go ahead and check out Locked On NBA today. In segment 2, I want to keep rolling with the idea of change. That's going to be a constant. I know that's kind of an oxymoron, but change is the constant here because we talked about CJ Montes. We talked about RJ Jefferson III. We talked about, RJ Johnson III and Tyler Jefferson. I knew that was going to kill me, but I'm thankful that I didn't mess it up during the segment. But that's all this changing pieces around the quarterback position at FAMU. What about South Carolina State? South Carolina State women's basketball, they need a change. And we talked about this earlier this week. It was on Tuesday originally. Gosh. Here we are on Friday. That's crazy. Anyway, here we are on Friday talking about this. I thought we were going to get to it a little bit earlier. I thought we would get to it on Wednesday, but that ended up just not being the case. But South Carolina State needed a proven winner to make them win, or at least in theory, because they've been bad for the last decade. They struggled to put together games, to put together wins. So when you're feeling like that is constant, see, we talked about Tim Eatman, but it expands beyond just him. Eatman had his own share of 3 years, just 7 victories, only had 4 in conference play. So you're not satisfied with what it is that Eatman gave you. Let's be very clear. You're not satisfied with that. But at the same time, it's not as if the struggle started with him. These are struggles that predated him and go back almost a decade as far as just being poor. And I'm going to get to some of the records in general because this is, I think we need to articulate where they were and where they've been for why Cedric Baker, the Savannah State, or former, I guess at this point, former Savannah State head coach, was a great pickup. They have not won games. They have not been competitive. South Carolina State women's basketball has been bottom feeders in the conference for a long time. And if I'm looking on the most surefire way, because nothing is guaranteed, if I'm looking for the most surefire way to change that, I need somebody who wins, not somebody who has been around winning, not somebody who has been a part of a winning program. I need somebody who has led a winning program. And that's exactly what Cedric Baker has done at Savannah State. He has 262 wins at that school. He's been coaching since I was a little one. He's been coaching since before I started real school. We're talking about 2003. Y'all hear me? Baker has been there since 2003. You don't get to be somewhere for 22 years without being a quality head coach. You don't get to be somewhere 22 years without being a winner because, yes, I'm sure you're going to have your ups and downs. Things are going to happen. But all in all, we have to consider you a winner. Winners don't always win. Y'all know that. Losers don't always lose. They don't. But it takes a lot for you to be a winner and stop being one, or for you to be a loser and stop being one, at least considered that, right? Like imagine this. Somebody who's a career loser goes out and they win a Super Bowl. That may change people's minds. That may. Look at Nick Foles. I think that being a champion can change that. But imagine you being a career winner. If Patrick Mahomes went 2-15 next year, are we going to say that Patrick Mahomes is a loser? I don't think that Drew Brees is a loser. He's had some 8-8, 7-9 seasons. He's had that. That's a great example because he's had high level of success. He is a winner, even though he's had some down years. So all in all, you don't get to be somewhere for 22 seasons without being successful, without being considered a winner. And he's got a couple of championships along the way. Now, one thing that I do want to note is that Baker is coming from Savannah State, a Division II school, and he's going to the MEAC. Some may say, all right, well, will it transfer? I think the first thing we look at is Patrick Crary. Number one, I think the first thing we look at is Patrick Crary. And that's one of the things that I everybody isn't him, but he's probably the most prominent example of coming from a lower subdivision. And he's also the most prominent example of a person succeeding while doing that. But the second thing I look at, and probably most important, is Baker's coached Savannah State when they were in the MEAC. So it's not as if he's unexperienced or inexperienced in this role. He has been a Division I head coach before, and he's just going back to doing it again. And when he was at Savannah State in the MEAC, he won the 2015 MEAC championship. So if we're talking about what has he done, he's put together nearly 300 victories at Savannah State. He has a history of winning. He has a couple of championships under his belt, one in the SIAC, one in the MEAC. So you're looking at a coach who has done it on both levels. That is not a thing for him to be concerned about. It's not a thing for anyone to be concerned about. And I know a lot of times we'll say, I don't know if that guy can do it. Well, he did it. So let's stop talking about it. And not only has he done it, he's done it in this specific conference. That's the other thing. He's done it in this very specific conference. So this idea that I don't want to say this idea like people have been saying. I think people are very happy about this hire. But this idea that because he came from the Division II level, that he can't coach on the mid-major, I'm not buying any of that. But yeah, I said I was going to talk about just the struggles. Over the last 3 years, South Carolina State has won 4 games in conference play. They beat Delaware State once in back-to-back seasons. And in one of those seasons, they had split with Delaware State, and it was both of their only wins of the season in conference play. You got to understand, most people are winning 4 MEAC games in a year. For you to have 4 and 3 is ridiculous. Even the bottom feeders probably are getting 4 and 2. You got 4 and 3. You are the bottom feeder, you know? So that's just kind of the way that I look at it. Like I said, you got to understand that this predates Eatman. It's been 10 years since South Carolina State had a winning record. That was in the 2014-15 season. It's been 6 years since they've hit 10 wins, just double-digit wins. I'm not even asking for much. Let's look at this real quick. MEAC women's basketball. And I want to look at the standings here because if you go to this year, 10 victories. That's all I'm talking about. 10 victories. Howard and Norfolk State had 10 victories in the conference alone. But fine, they're the top 2. Let's not compare them. Cobbin State had 19 victories. Maryland Eastern Shore had 13 victories. Morgan State had 13 victories in this season. So you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in that conference. North Carolina Central had 9 wins. You know, so like last year, you have 5 teams with 10 plus wins. This is doable. This should have been done at some point in the last 6 years, in my opinion. So this is it's been a terrible run. And you go get a guy who has been experienced in winning. You go get a guy who has led teams to championships on both subdivisions. You go get a guy who has built up teams, built up programs within a new conference. I trust Cedric Baker on every single level to get it done. And if I'm South Carolina State, that's the exact thing that I was looking for. I need a winner. I just need to win. Get me a winner. It's that simple. Now just push forward. Unfortunately, Diamond Johnson is out of the WNBA, and I don't see her coming back this year. I think that overseas is the best bet for Johnson. And I'll tell you why as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. And if you're anything like me, sometimes you lose track of how much that you're spending because you're just flowing. I got it. I got it. I got it. Hopefully you don't go too far with the I got it. Luckily, I haven't. But have you ever checked your bank account and wondered where did all the money go? Between dining out, entertainment, online shopping, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal CFO and gives you full visibility and control over your finances. So it's not just a budgeting app. I think that that's underselling it. Instead, I call it a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. And so you can stop just managing money and start building up wealth. Listen, when I started using Monarch, I realized where everything was going and how much I was spending on frivolous things. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code Locked On College at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year using the code Locked On College. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. I think this is it for Diamond Johnson. She's been released by the Minnesota Lynx, and I don't really see a path. I don't see the path. I see a path, but I just don't think it's likely. I don't see the path for her back to the W this year. Now, that doesn't mean she can't ever make it. She can step away for a year, go overseas. I think overseas is her best bet at this point. But I think that she could go overseas, play, hoop, ball, and be able to come back to the W. But I just don't see why a team would pick her up at this point. So Minnesota had their first preseason game on Tuesday. I believe it was the 6th. Yeah, that was Tuesday. So they had their first preseason game on the 6th. And the problem is she didn't have hers. She was a DNP. A coach's decisions did not play. She was one of 4 players who didn't play in that game. And she was one of 4 players who was released after that game. So clearly they had their mind made up. They said, yeah, she's not making the team. These other people aren't making it. We're not going to push forward. So we're just going to go ahead and cut that off. And I know a lot of people felt like, man, that's jacked up. She didn't even get to play a preseason game. You cut her. I get it. But to me, it's not really jacked up. To me, it's more unfortunate than unfair. I think it was still fair because clearly what they saw in training camp, they said, we're not gonna move forward here. We're not gonna move forward. The reason it's unfortunate is it's the end of her opportunity. This is when it comes to Diamond Johnson, she wasn't able to play in the Lynx first preseason game, and then she was cut. So that's the end of that opportunity. And I kind of feel like not playing dead's future opportunities as well. It's not the responsibility of the Lynx to prepare or for them to showcase themselves so that other people can pick them up. That's not what they're here for. They're here to win games and make sure that their roster is set up. And to set up their roster, they probably want to get their people the maximum amount of reps that they could. But as I'm thinking about it now, all you have to rely on is what you had to rely on before the draft. And that's the same pieces of information, the same pieces of tape, the same measurements. It's the same everything that led to her not being drafted. I like Diamond Johnson a lot. I like her game a lot. I liked her coming out as a prospect, and I thought that she should have been drafted. But all of the teams in the W passed on her. They all passed. That says something about how she's valued. That says something about how she's viewed. So for you to have all of that and then you go ahead and leave, or for you to have all of that and then you get picked up by the Lynx, that's kind of like your last ditch effort to me. For you to get picked up by the Lynx, I'm looking at them like, okay, cool. They got her. She's in camp. She has to make it do what it do now. But they cut her without her being able to showcase anything she does in the W. So now, she's kind of small. Now, I don't really like her arm length. I don't know if she can do this. Everything that you question that made you not everything that you question that made you not draft Diamond Johnson in the WNBA draft this year, nothing's changed for you. So now the question becomes, how did you value her? Is she an undrafted free agent? Well, we're getting close to the regular season. I might not want to bring her in. Because if I'm bringing her in, I'm thinking she's making the team. There's no more tryout. I'm thinking you're making the team. If that was the case, why didn't I draft you? I just think you're in an interesting predicament now. Because time-wise, she probably won't get on another training camp roster. Showcase-wise, she hasn't shown anything in the W for you to feel like her value increased. And where was her value to begin with? It was a UDFA. She went undrafted for a reason. They do not view her in this light. So I think that going overseas, building up your stock, doing everything the right way overseas, but build up your stock, that's the best bet now at this point. That's just the way that I view it. It's unfortunate, it's unfair, or excuse me, it's unfortunate, but it's not unfair. I wasn't in them practices. So anyway, on Monday's episode, we're talking about Makai Hagans, who was transferred from UAPB to another school, and now he's transferring over to Alabama A&M. A lot of people are excited about this. Let's get into that on Monday's episode. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.